So I was like, let me try to get a job. Um, so yeah, so I knew I could get a job if I could land an interview. And so I started sending out some applications, and I found a company that was looking for a very junior level database developer. And I was thinking, okay, so I know that there is a database course on the Tech Academy program. Let me give it a shot. So I sent in an application and I got an interview. And then I was very upfront with the guy who was interviewing me. And I said, yep, I know very little about this, but I have a natural aptitude for computers and I can learn just about anything. So you tell me what skills you need, and I'll make sure that I can perform on each of those. And then over the next couple weeks, so there was the interview, and then I actually started 3 weeks later. And within that 3 week time period, I blitzed through the first few courses of the Tech Academy program. I did some additional tutorials on other skill sets that they wanted me to have, and then I got started. So that was in 2018. Now jump forward to 2021. I've been promoted to be the senior developer for the company. And in addition to that, they more recently approached me to do some contract work in addition to my W-2 work, doing some database administration. So now just let's see if I can get a raise of hands. When I say database administration versus database development, does that make sense what the two different things would be? Okay, some yeses, some nos. So for real simple, this is how I explain it to my wife, who is not a technical person. I said, if I were building a house on the database side, like the development side, I'd be building cabinetry. I'd be building a vanity that's going to go into a bathroom. I'm going to be building new things and new features to transport information to various parts of our services. On the database administration side, that'd be more like me looking through the blueprints and making sure things are up to building code, and that the transfer of information can happen because you have a good foundation and you have a good floor plan that will allow the movement of data. Does that make sense? Perfect. Good. So yeah, so I'm the senior developer for the company, and now I'm also contracted to do their DBA work, and they are giving me more and more work, which is great. But it all started with me knowing nothing. So kind of wanted to share a little bit on how I got there. And the reason why I wanted to choose this subject is I know that most of us here, are we students? Some people looking into the program, is it mostly students?
Yeah, mostly students.
Great. Yeah, so I remember from having worked at the Tech Academy, just finished and actively applying. That's what I like to hear. So I remember from when I was at the school, there's kind of this leap of faith of like, oh my God, I have worked in construction, or I've worked in customer service my whole life. I'm going to go learn how to be a software developer. What does that mean? I have no clue, but I'm going to punch some ones and zeros on my keyboard and hopefully get a really big paycheck, right? And that was kind of the mentality that people had. A lot of them had no experience coming into this. And then once they get to their job search, they get a little bit nervous. And I think a lot of that nervousness stems from not knowing what's going to happen on day one. And so I want to go over, this is what day one looks like. This is what day 30 looks like. This is what day 90 looks like. That way you kind of know what to expect. And it's not something to worry about as much because you'll know what's going to be happening. So the first step is, once you get hired, you go through the interview process. You tell the guy, hey, this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And they say, perfect, you're exactly what we're looking for, which a lot of companies are looking for people who have some knowledge, but haven't mastered the skill set yet. Obviously, it's cheaper for them to hire someone who's newer. And most companies, my company included, have complex systems that it doesn't matter how good your code is, you're not going to understand how their system works, how all the moving parts interact, until you have a chance to actually interact with them. So on day one, you will be totally useless to the company. Whether you are the best developer in the world or whether you know nothing, your value is going to be about the same, because you need to find out what the company does, what products they offer, how information travels. Whether you're doing database work and you're looking at the back end, how the information travels, or you're doing front end work and you're trying to see, okay, well, how does the various pages, how do they interact, all of that. So on day one, you will be completely useless. Luckily, this is where the provisional period comes in. You're gonna, for the first 3 to 6 months, we're just gonna test and see, are you a good fit? Excuse me while I take a drink.
Derek, while you're taking a drink, I just wanted to check in with you and make sure that you don't intend to have your slideshow shared yet at the moment.
Oh, no, I did thought I was sharing my slideshow. Here, let me switch to the other tab.
We see your Google Meet screen. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I should have checked in with you sooner. My bad.
No worries. You guys missed all the really good slides. I hope that's okay. No, I'm just kidding. Literally, title screen, first page. So, yeah, so when you're first getting hired, you're going to go through a provisional period. The beauty of that is it gives you a chance, especially someone with no experience, to get experience. And during this time, I was talking to someone who is, nervous, like, oh my God, what if I mess up? What if I get fired while, going through this? They offered me a job, but it's not a long-term thing. What if I lose my job? And I told him, I said, that's great. They fire you after 3 months. You now have industry experience, at least 3 months worth. So the next time you go and apply for another job, it's even easier. And it's one of these things that, as a developer, your life gets easier and easier the more that you do, the more that you learn, and the more that you know. So typically, during this provisional period, the employer wants to see, can you perform the duties that's going to be required of you? They also want to make sure that you're a good cultural fit. Are you going to get along with the other people in the office? Everyone's going to play nice. And lastly, that you actually enjoy working there. I remember when I talked to my boss at my 90-day point, and he said, good, do you like this job? And I told him, yeah. Good, I mentioned this point. If you fail utterly during this time, it is okay. It is totally okay. There are numerous reasons why you might not be a good fit for a company, but nevertheless, getting more experience and being able to see how professionals do this job is going to be a huge benefit to you. A lot of the times, people in this industry, because they're self-taught, they learn the basics of how to do something, but they don't always know how to do something properly. And I'll give you a great example of that. We have a process. It's a big section of code, probably about 6,000 lines, and it takes about 50 minutes to run. And it's transferring millions and millions of records. And we put it together and we tested it and tested it and tested it, and then we deployed it. And we were confident that this runs correctly every time we run it, which was true. Every time we ran it, it was successful. We even tested it in a near live environment where every time we tested it there, it would still run A-OK. The only problem was, if it runs through part of the way and completes some of the code, but doesn't complete the rest of it, then we kind of ran into a problem of, okay, well, how do we can't just start it over, because then it's going to run that first portion again. And so there's industry standards on what to do when you start running a process that you weren't able to complete. Maybe you had a connection timeout in the middle of it, or something that was not related to your code being incorrect. And some of those standards you'll learn in a professional environment. So during your provisional period, you're going to be able to see certain things where you're like, why is this that way? And you should ask those questions, because you'll pick up more skills that way. Lastly, when I first started at the company that I work at, there was, the first few weeks was very tough. I had 3 weeks of training myself on how to, become a SQL developer. which, not that SQL is the hardest language in the world, but it was only 3 weeks worth of time. And so when I first started, I still had a lot to learn. But I knew that walking into this. And so what I did is I noted down what technical things do I need to learn, and then what things about the company do I need to learn. I work in the energy industry, which is a very technical, not having to do with technology, but it's a very unique and specific industry where we deal with a transferring of, kilowatts, pumping it to the grid, ensuring that our customer is using that amount of energy, et cetera. And so there was a lot about the company that I needed to learn. After learning about the company, I then needed to know, okay, how does the data move through the company from enrolling a client so that we are their supplier for their energy, versus, all the various parts to the company. So while I was working, during the hours 9 to 5, I spent most of my time trying to understand the movement of data. And then I noted down what things did I see in the code that I didn't understand. For the database side, I don't want to just start throwing terms at you because I don't know exactly who's where in the process yet. But on the database side, there's all these different parts and things that they had integrated into their system. And a lot of them I didn't know. Some of them I did know, and I was really proud of those ones. But a lot of them I didn't know. So during the day, I spent my time figuring out how does this company work. And then at nighttime, I started studying the technical skills that I needed to advance, which was perfect for me. Now, after the provisional period, let's say 90 days goes by, and let's say you don't get fired, right? Hopefully you don't. But if you do, it's okay. So the 90 days goes by, and you are successful at learning about your company and picking up whatever skills that are going to be necessary for you to do your job. And you kind of get to where you're at, like, step 0 of I can do my job and that's about it. In my case, I was hired to be able to mainly do SQL Server reporting services and just building reports. So I need to select something in SQL, take that code, throw it into a report, put a bar graph to it, send that out to someone in the company. Someone wants to know, how many active customers do we have? How many people do we have in New York? How many people do we have in Pennsylvania? What were the total sales numbers for yesterday? All of those go into a report, which help that person do their job, or at least analyze how they're doing their job. And so step 1 for me was learning how to do basic selects, learning all the different tables, learning which things I should exclude, because even though someone made a sale, maybe it wasn't good. Maybe there was some type of a thing that was said on that sale that makes it where we can't actually enroll that guy. So it looks like there's a sale, but the data integrity is not totally there. So ensuring that I was excluding those, that way I was providing correct information. So I started to master SSRS. I started doing things that other people had not previously done with just some of the graphs, the presentation. I took a lot of care into how the end user was going to be receiving this. And once I was comfortable with that, then I knew, like, okay, great. How do I turn my job into where I am someone that they have to have? And the one thing, and I know Eric's said this tons of times, and I just kind of heard his voice in my head as I was going through this, is I started to volunteer for projects that I knew that it was going to require skills that I did not have. It was going to force me to continue learning and for me to pick up new skills. Because, and we'll get a little bit more into this as we go a little bit later. But the more you know, the more valuable you are as a developer. So I was constantly trying to force myself to learn new things. And specifically, I was looking for skills that the rest of my team lacked. So, I was hired to learn how to build reports. But pretty much everyone on my team, they could write a select statement. That wasn't, that didn't make me special. everyone could do it. And so I was like, okay, well, what type of skills would make me unique and different from all the rest of the developers on my team? So I started to find some skills. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, it'd be really fun if I did this thing. And my first idea was a horrible idea. I pitched it to my senior and I said, hey, I really want to learn how to do this. What do you think? And he said, that sounds like it would be a lot of fun. We have no use for that currently. And I was like, okay, crap, right? And so then I started to learn more about what the company does and, constantly learning. But then I started to look at skills that were tougher to learn. Something that might be kind of flashy and, and a little bit easier. That's great, but because it's easier, the barrier to entry is super low. So anyone else can just go learn that thing too. And so I started to look for things that were a little bit trickier, that people wouldn't necessarily want to go learn, but were still needed skills. Which got me to my first kind of breakthrough on my position. Empty bullet point. That this is not always the latest technology. So one of the systems that we had is we had a lot of access databases. Now, I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Word and Excel. Within the Microsoft Office suite, there's also something called an access database, which runs similar-ish to SQL, where it is a database. You can store information in tables. You can run queries to those tables. You have the ability to create a form to interact with those tables and manipulate data and move it around and all that type of stuff. But it's like super clunky. And we didn't even have the newest version of Access. We were running I think it was 2014. And so going through there, I felt like I was going through a time machine. I actually called my dad, who just so happens to be a database developer who loves Access. So I was like, great. Tell me about this. Where do I start? How do I learn this? And so he kind of walked me through some of the things. And then I started doing tutorials online to where I could at least learn Access. Now, my company's position on this was that we are not allowed to build anything new in Access. We are transitioning everything over to SQL, everything over to SQL Server Reporting Services, or we call it SSRS. And we are trying to upgrade our technology into the newer things, which was all good. So we knew, okay, no one learn Access, except when things break. And there's systems that people are reliant upon that no longer function. Well, the person who built most of these Access databases no longer worked in this area. So we then had to sometimes be able to contact him over in a completely separate area and say, hey, this thing is broken. We need it right now. Yeah, we're going to upgrade it soon. I promise. We're going to upgrade it to this other thing. I swear. But after, time moved forward, new projects come in that are a higher priority than updating some of our older systems. And it just didn't get done. So I said, great, I'm going to learn Access. And pretty soon, new projects would come around. And every time that there was a break in something, I became the guy of, oh, hey, can you look into this? We got to report an issue on this thing. They need it fixed by Wednesday because of X, Y, and Z, to where I now had a skill set that no one else on my team really had, except for someone who was like 2 steps above me. He could come down and do that thing, but he's paid kind of the big bucks to where it's not really worth his time and attention to go fix that thing. Having me be the brand new guy who is probably paid the least amount on the team, having me jump in there for 3 hours, they were very willing to expend that resource. So yes, learn things that are new, learn things that are flashy, and learn things that are going to improve your skill set. But when you get into a situation where you work for a company, I really want to stress that you want to understand the company's needs. That way you can determine what is going to help the company the most. And this will key into our next step here. Learn more about what your company does. I feel like I've stressed that enough. Everyone tracking with the fact of that? I got a couple thumbs up. Good. So, and let me go backwards a little bit. Okay, good. So, and that really transitions into a little bit further down the line. So once you've gone 90 days, you've gone 180 days, you've been with a company like 6 months or so, you're now at the point where you're able to handle what's expected of you. And now you're starting to reach for more and build new skill sets. And all of this ties completely to the concept of how to get a raise, which I feel like most people coming into this industry, they're like, yep, it's something that I enjoy doing. It's something that I like, and it's something that will give me a good raise. And the beauty of this industry is that you can make yourself super valuable super quickly to where you do get a raise very quickly, and they tend to jump a little bit more so than other positions within the company. So I first want to go over the mindset that I would recommend taking. And as a disclaimer, anything that I say, like, this is the mindset that I had. This is the things that I did. These were all my successful actions. They might not be your successful actions. And so I don't want anyone in here to adopt this as gospel or anything like that. This is just what was successful for me. If any of this is applicable to you guys, great. That's why I'm doing this talk. I want it to ideally help you guys. But if there's something that doesn't jive for you, that's fine. You can disregard that part. I'm not trying to enforce a viewpoint for you. So this is the mindset I had. When you're a developer, you're developing solutions to problems that people experience. If you're building a website for a company, let's say that they sell T-shirts, and you're building a website for them, and they want to be able to sell more T-shirts to people all over. You're developing the solution that they can access people in different states, different countries even, to sell those T-shirts. Those solutions that you are developing, they have a value attached to them, and very specifically, they have a monetary value attached to them, and that can be new products, new features that have new income coming in. So the company now makes more because you were developing a specific thing. Or it can have a monetary value of reducing expenses. We are now saving time because we aren't paying 5 people to go manually do this thing. That saves the company money. Great, we are now more efficient as a company. The fact that you built that adds value to you because you are now helping the company succeed. So you can build things that save time for employees. You can build things that reduce risk. With my company, we do a lot of sales. We have about 100 sales reps, and they're calling people from all over the country. Well, there's certain things that they legally can and cannot do, and ensuring that we have our legal requirements in, make sure that we're protected. If someone's on the do not call list, we don't want to call them. If we accidentally call someone who's on the do not call list, but our technology is not up to the point where we could recognize that quick enough, that puts the company at risk. And we've fallen for that, that exact situation. And it is not a cheap mistake to make. So your monetary value to what you're providing there could be in the form of reducing risk for your company. And lastly, there's the security, which is similar to reducing risk, but when you'll hear this time and time again in the tech industry, people can make their way into your systems, make their way into your network, and start to steal your information. By improving your security, you're putting your longevity there for your company, which that also has a monetary value that can be assigned to that. Kind of in an inverse negative of, well, we didn't lose the $1 million that we would have lost had someone come in. That one's a little bit harder to quantify exactly. And none of these are necessarily easy to quantify. But the mindset that I had is I want to make sure that my company is making as much money as possible purely because of the things that I am developing for it, the solutions that I put in place. So that was my mindset. It was a very solution oriented, but really the value of the solutions that I produce. Now, a really key point on the solutions that you can develop as a developer is purely based on what your skill sets are. Now, you're kind of in this position where when you first get started, you have no clue what you don't know. Otherwise, like if you kind of knew about the things that you didn't know, then you would at least know kind of about it, but you might not really know it. But your company and likely the rest of your team, the people above you, and ideally the people below you, there's things that they won't know. And if you can improve your skill set to include things that others don't know, that makes you obviously more valuable. So I always recommend spend lots of time learning new things. Find things that will add to your tool belt. We always call it your Batman utility belt. New skills that can be added there that will improve the solutions that you can provide to your company, so that your solutions are more valuable and that you can produce them faster, etc. So that over time, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but over time, your value when you first start off is going to be close to nothing. You're going to have produced nothing that makes the company better. As you start to progress and you learn about your job and you learn about what's needed and wanted from you, then you can start producing close to, what they're hoping to at least get out of you, type of thing. And the more you learn, then you can start to exceed what they expected. And then there's going to come a point where if you keep growing and keep offering more to the company, then you're going to be producing way more than what you're getting paid. Now that leads into the whole concept of, okay, well, how do you get a raise? The next step is, once you're at that point where you are now providing better and better solutions, you have to ask for your raise. Sometimes people will, annually they'll do a meeting with you and they'll say, great, here's a 2% raise, here's a 3% raise. Those are fine. Those are great. Going from 50,000 to 50, what would 5% be? 52.5. That's cool. But I wanted to grow really quickly. And so it required a little bit more of me selling myself. So I was working on improving my solutions, improving the things that I can provide to the company. And then I went to my senior and I said, hey, I'm doing more and more for the company. I think I should get paid more. And at that point, he was not legally required to give me a raise, but he was morally obligated now that I am producing more for the company. And he said, I agree. I think you absolutely should. If we look at what you're doing now versus what you were doing 6 months ago, it's night and day difference. You're a totally different, different person, a different developer. And you'll see that in your code too. If you look at code that you wrote 6 months ago, you're like, what was I thinking? I'm such an idiot. But yeah, so then as you grow, I'll say, my boss told me, yep, if we look at what you were doing 6 months ago, you're doing more for the company. You're taking on larger problems. You're handling larger headaches for the rest of the company, to where I totally agree. You should make more. So I did some research on okay, well, what would someone in this position, what would they make? And so then I kind of took that leap of faith of, great, I'm basically producing as though I were this type of a position. That's what I should get paid. And, there's obviously the negotiation that goes back and forth for that, but I eventually we came to an agreement of where my new salary was going to be at, which I can't go into the fine details of what those numbers actually are, but nonetheless, I think you guys get the point. Now, a lot of companies, some will give you an annual review. And oftentimes the people that do annual reviews, they might give you a raise that's, a little bit smaller, a couple percent on top of your current salary. But don't expect them to be like, oh, hey, you've been doing a really good job. I've been thinking about this. You really deserve a much higher salary. I want to pay you more. There is that moral obligation, but in the working world, it's not always something that people just originate off the bat. So be willing to ask, be willing to hear no. When I first asked for a raise, I was like, hey, I think I should make this. My senior said, yeah, you totally should. In fact, you should have asked for more, but this is what we're doing because that's what you asked for. We sent that into the executive body of my company, and they came back and they said, hey, no, we're actually not doing any raises right now. This was right as, the whole pandemic was starting last year. And so no one was getting raises at that point in time. And so then, a few months went by. I was keeping track of the information, and obviously I can see everything that's happening in the company. I know exactly what we are making, what we aren't making, and all that stuff. And then, when the time was right, I submitted my request again. I said, great, I would like a raise. Only unfortunate thing is now we're 4 months ahead, and now I'm doing even more. So back when I asked earlier, it was going to be here, and now that I'm doing even more, it's actually going to be here. And my senior, again, he was like, you're not wrong. Go ahead and submit that. You have my full agreement that is true. You are doing more than you were 4 months ago. And that second one got approved, which was great, because now, rather than being stuck for a year at this lower level, I was at the higher level. So that's kind of the things that I wanted to stress. It is best to just expect that you have to ask for a raise. You're not necessarily going to get it just because you work there. And then you might actually get it. You might be surprised and someone says, hey, great, by the way, we're going to give you an extra $10,000 on top of your salary. And then you're like, oh, I didn't even have to ask for it. Hey, that's great. But if you go into it expecting that they're going to originate it, then you're going to start to feel resentment in your company. And then, it kind of snowballs into where you say, I just want to leave. I'm going to go find another place that values me a little bit more. So yeah, I really stress to people, just be willing to experience what that conversation is like. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be a little bit tricky, but in the end, it's something where feelings don't generally get hurt. A lot of the times in a company, it's a very logical approach. I want to make X. Well, we have Y. Hey, Y is greater than X. That's what I want you to pay me. Or I want to make X. Well, we only have Y. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to ask again soon. So it's, a lot of the times they take the emotion out of it and just be willing to experience them to just say flat out, no, I'm sorry, we can't afford that right now. Okay, good. So that was the slides that I had prepared. With it being kind of a muted thing, there's been less opportunity for question and answer, but I am interested. I don't want to ask the generic question of, hey, what questions do you have for me? But I'm more curious, what do you guys, what types of things are you worried about, or what types of things do you have questions on for once you actually get started working? You can start typing these out, or you can, oh, hey, look, someone.
There are a couple in the chat box already. Ricardo asked what version of SQL you were using. Yeah,
so check this out, Ricardo. We are using SQL Server 2012. You will sometimes, so obviously there's later versions that are out. I have been advocating that we upgrade, at least to 2016. But the problem is that the CEO of the company, he doesn't understand, okay, well, what's the difference between 2012 and 2016? Someone needs to be able to present the data of, this is what it can now do, and these are the solutions that it's going to provide. So it's going to cost you a lot. It's not really cheap to upgrade that. But here's what it will now allow us to do. So more from not from my developer side, but from the work that I'm doing on my database administration, I now am going to be advising the company on certain things like that. When I'm looking at the floor plans, I can say, hey, you guys should really look into upgrading to 2016 because of A, B, and C. Or you guys could take the next leap and go to 2018 because of, D, E, and F. But really lay out the information so that we can upgrade to later versions. And one thing just on that specific point is I think that especially when you're first starting to learn in the tech industry, there's some companies that are always on the cutting edge of everything and they have the latest versions. But when you look at a company that's been around for 20 years, they're not always just trying to get the newest thing and always getting the newest thing. They're generally building a thing, glad that it works. They've got people doing that thing, and then they try to start building other things. But because that thing worked, they're like, great, that's working. Go. No need to change that thing. We want to start doing these other things too. So I wouldn't expect every company to just have the latest version of every software that you go and touch. But yeah, but that's a great question.
And then Brian Allen, sorry.
Go ahead.
Brian Allen asked, where could I use Russian and Mandarin as a software developer?
Good question. So you know other non-developer languages that you can use to your advantage. It's a great question. I don't know that I have a great answer for you. If I were in your shoes, I would totally leverage that skill set, whether that's, look into the travel industry or translation services or different things like that. Figure out what companies in Russia want to do business in the US or what companies that naturally speak, one language and want to do business with another language. That's where I would start to look at leveraging those skill sets. But absolutely, always use what you got.
And then Priyanka asked what the work-family balance is in the starting days, and also how you manage eye strain if it's something that you experience from too much screen staring. And I swear, just after reading that, I started to get a slight headache.
Yeah, everyone starts rubbing their eyes like, what are you talking about?
I personally love my my blue light blocking glasses that I don't wear during the talks because they reflect the blue screen back.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you asked that question because I recently got a screen that goes on top of your monitor, and it kind of blocks things out. Now I'm a big fan of dark mode on everything, which on my SSMS or the SQL Server Management Studio version that I'm using, there's no dark mode. So I literally had to go customize mine to go make my own dark mode, and it was crazy. But yeah, so the solutions on that, there are things that you can put in front of your monitor. There's also the blue glasses. I have a pair of those over in the other room. But largely what I've found too is that if you spend too much time staring at the screen, just get up and walk around. Like don't feel like you're fixed to your monitor, because there's a lot of things that are going to be happening in your head as you come up with, okay, well, what are the best solutions? How do I do that? And if you need to step away from your desk to think about those things, feel free to do so. The other question that you asked really rings home with me of how did I balance the work and family life? It was not easy. But a really key part is that I was in touch with my wife and I said, hey, the first few months of this is going to suck. I don't have a way to sugarcoat this. It's going to be a lot of me working really hard, which, we kind of discussed the options. Like there is the option of me not working quite as hard. I could focus more so on learning while I'm at work and not learning at night. And my wife, so I started working at the company 3 days after my wife delivered. And so we had a brand new baby. adorable beyond belief. All of us are just getting horrible sleep, and and I just kind of pushed myself to say, no, I'm gonna do well here. Now, my wife and I were already prepared, having a daughter, that we were like, okay, we know we're not going to get a lot of sleep. And it's similar to and a lot of my friends who are especially newer parents, most people expect when they are having a child that they're not going to get a lot of sleep. And when you kind of know that going into parenthood, it's less scary. And the same is true for when you go into that as a developer. If you know the first little bit, I'm going to have to work my butt off, then it's not as scary. But you should talk to your spouse, your significant other, whoever it is, the people that you affect, and say, we have a few options here. I can work really hard and ramp myself up really quickly, or I can work a little bit less hard, make sure that you have the time and attention that you very much deserve. What do you think? What do you want? And my wife was like, babe, I'm not going to be working. I want you to make as much money as you can, because I just had a baby. So I expect you to make a lot of money. And my wife, she's incredible, but she pushes me probably more than I push myself, but she really pushes me to do my best, which is one of the reasons why I married her. But going into it, we had our agreements established, and we kind of knew what we were getting into, to where when it was difficult, quote unquote difficult, we knew that. So it wasn't like a shock, I guess. But yeah, it's great question. I'm gonna read the next question. Would your position be called a data science position? It's a good question. I don't know that I would necessarily categorize it in data science, because that tends to look more at large patterns and looking for commonalities. There is an aspect of what I do that could be data science, but I do that more on the basis of, I have some downtime. I want to figure out, we'll just use the sales floor as an example. We've got a whole bunch of people doing cold calls, right? They're on the phones calling people, and that's their job. And I want to figure out, based off of the information that I have about this lead, how can I figure out who's going to be the most likely person to say yes, based off of the calls that we've had before, based off of their location, based off of what services, because we work with different utilities, and we can provide different energy rates in different markets, based off of what our current rates are compared to what they currently have. What information points can we use to be more successful? That's more the data science aspect. The development side is more so, hey, we have these customers and we want to sell this new product, but that's going to require us to also capture this information and do this other cool thing, and that's going to make the customer really happy. So those new things that are working together, that needs to be fit into our database. That's more the development side. Now, a lot of the times you kind of put this thing together and you're like, all right, yeah, you just insert it just like that. But then after you insert it, you're like, oh shit, that breaks this other thing, and so you kind of have to figure out, how do you build the correct thing for that position. But yeah, good question. Oh, this is going back to the eyesight one. I use them, but I don't know if they help. What I would do too, and people have different, I guess, sensitivity with their eyes, but I would also just talk to an optician and figure out, hey, what you know about my eyes, what do you suggest? What's the best way to encounter or to overcome this thing that you're experiencing? Because they might have better things that they can suggest. Good. So then, all good questions. Does anyone have any? I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this, because I don't necessarily want to ask in front of a group of people, hey, tell me all your fears. But at the same time, like what worries you, or what things are a little bit tough to confront about day 1 or day 30 of a job. Those are things that I would love to also help address. And if you want to message those to Mackenzie, I'm sure this software has a way to do that. And then she can ask, you can also do that as well.
I do see a question here from Jonas asking how important do you feel a willingness to relocate is, and if you think working remotely is going to be the new norm, especially post-pandemic.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and I was trying to make a mental note to touch on this, but through the whole pandemic, when I was talking about building new skill sets, building things especially that your team doesn't have, and things that make you unique, that saved my job, because at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of people on my team that were let go. But because I was the guy that knew this thing, they didn't really have the option to get rid of me. They literally had to keep me because I was the only one that could do this specific thing. And so it gave me all kinds of job security. Now, when the pandemic first started, I was like, I think it took everyone by surprise of what the world kind of shifted to, and luckily, my position is so easy to do from home that it was kind of an easier transition. I'd say easier work-wise. Having my 2-year-old daughter come in and sing some of Frozen, or come singing songs of Coco or whatever, that was always its own distraction, because she's just like, she is adorable, and that's its own thing. But the ability to be remote is a great ability. I prefer to be in person. That's just my preference. I think I get a lot more work done that way. I also don't have my adorable child singing songs at me when I'm in the office. So that's kind of a benefit for my work life. In terms of, do I think things will transition more remote, more not? It's tough to say. I think people are going to be more and more willing to have people be remote, or have a combination of both remote and in person. I have the option to where I can now start working from home on days that I want to. I've made it pretty clear. I get more done when I go to the office, so I prefer that. But the rest of my team and the people that are above me in the company, I go like this, and I'm thinking, wow, there's actually a lot less people above me than when I first started. They're all cool with me just working from home, and so they're like, yeah, if you need to work from home, let me know. Which is kind of a benefit that people in our industry had during this whole transition. In terms of the importance of being willing to relocate, that's going to be different for each person, and you'll need to figure what that is for you. In my situation, my wife and I were just having a child. It was 3 days before I started working. I wasn't going to go move somewhere just having a newborn, right? And we specifically chose Florida because that's where her parents lived, because people retire in Florida or something like that. And so we came to Florida, and if I got a great job offer in Tennessee or in New York or Chicago or anywhere else, I wouldn't take it because my family's here, and that's my importance level. But in the company that I work at, there's a guy that just got hired that lives in Houston, and he got flown in. He's on his second week, and he's literally living in a hotel right now, going through his provisional period. And he's doing great from everything that I can see. I don't get to work with him quite as much as I would like to. He seems like a great guy, but he was like, yeah, I don't know anyone here, and I'm currently living in a hotel, so I go to work, I go to the gym, go home, I watch Netflix, go to sleep, and then I do that again. But the skills and the possibilities for my career are worth it for me to do that. And so it's going to be different from person to person. That's something that you'll have to evaluate.
Awesome. Now we have a lot of questions in the chat now. So
okay, great.
Douglas.
So
Douglas asked, once a new hire has gained knowledge that differentiates them from others on their team. What are your thoughts on that hire? One, retaining that knowledge for future raise reasons, or two, sharing that knowledge with their team to increase the team dynamic?
Great question. Love that question. So my senior and I, which I kind of took this point of view from him, is we always wanted other people to learn things, and certain people are going to be receptive to that, and certain people are not. I always wanted to share the information that I had acquired with other people, because they're still going to come to me when they have questions about the thing that I taught them about. So you don't necessarily lose that value when you share it with others. And in fact, what ends up happening is you now start freeing up more time because someone else is starting to do other things that you're already aware of, and that frees you up to go learn the next thing. And that's something that I've applied at the company that I work at, to where there's been times where my senior, who is, I would say, more intelligent than I am, developmentally speaking, he can do more things than I can do. But there were times where he was busy on a thing. And so then I had to go learn this new skill set. I picked it up. After I finished my project, I sat down with him and I said, hey, let me show you what I did. Here's the high level view of how this works. Now, if you want to get into the weeds, super willing. But this is the high level view of this project. And so then he started asking questions to where, at this point, he could probably go do everything that I had produced. But he now knows what to look for, and I know what to look for should anything go wrong, to where now the team's all doing better. And that was a skill set that I have now, similar to like how we're doing a video chat and we're recording this. I have a lot of video recordings at my company to where I show them how to do other things, because the more people that learn what skills I have, the more time I have to learn more advanced skills, which is how I am now at the point where I'm learning, really low level, underneath the hood things about SQL, to where I was able to then obtain that DBA contract with my company. So I love that question. I always recommend share that knowledge, expand not only yourself, but then the rest of your team, which then gives its own value of you now are kind of like the curator of new technology to the rest of your team. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love that answer.
Paul asks, how do you sell yourself to an employer when you were let go during the provisional period prior? It's a great question. I would say, hey, it wasn't a good cultural fit. And I would be upfront with them. They wanted skill sets A, B, and C, which I could do A. B, I was having a lot of trouble with. Is B something that you guys are requiring? And their answer might be, oh, we don't do that at all. Like, okay, great. Something about it I couldn't understand, and I wasn't getting the help that I was looking for. And so the company and I, we just determined that it wasn't going to be the correct fit for me. Now, the things that I really value in a company, because a lot of the times when a company's interviewing you, there's kind of the thing like they interview you and you interview them, which is true. But I would just make it known that these are the things that I really needed. And I got the help that I wanted, or I didn't get that help, and I wasn't able to do those things. And so that's why we determined it wasn't a good fit. I'm hoping that this company is looking for these types of things, which I am very confident in. And I know I can produce well if that's what you guys are looking for. And then they will start to get, which you shouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily like attempt to apply for a job using skills that you hate. If it's something that you like, you will naturally learn because you enjoy it. And so, yeah, I would just stress, like, look at the things that you enjoy. I really like data. I'm a total database kind of guy. When someone asked me like, oh, could you design a website for me? I had to change my underpants because I'm not a designer. my wife decorated my entire house. We're going to keep it that way because, you know, I'm not going to make something look pretty. I will make it function. And that's kind of where my expertise lies and where it's kind of how I'm wired. So yeah, I was really highlighting my strengths. And I think that's something that is talked about a lot in the job placement course at the end of the program. But highlight the things that you enjoy and that are your strengths. Yeah. I'm reading Ricardo's question. He says, going back into your interview process, which was a trip, by the way. I believe you said that you didn't know the exact programming language they wanted, but convinced them to hire you anyways. How did you do that? It was great. So the person who was hiring me, you know, this is someone in HR, which is he was not a developer. So I spoke more of the development language because I worked around developers than he did. And I'm not trying to say like, oh yeah, I pulled a fastball on him or something like that. I was real upfront with him saying, hey, his name was Carl. I said, hey, Carl, I have no professional experience with this. You know, this is not something that I've been doing my entire life, but I have a natural aptitude for computers. I just pick them up, and I've always been that way. And I know that I can learn anything. So regardless of what skills you guys want, you just kind of point me in the direction of this is what I want you to be able to do, and I'll do it. And if I don't, you can get rid of me. I promise. And so I was real upfront with him that I wasn't someone with experience. And to that, he responded, he said, perfect. That's actually exactly what we're looking for. We're not looking to pay someone $90,000 who's going to spend the next 6 months learning about our software and our system, who also has no real value yet. We're looking for someone that is newer, that we can train on the things that we do, and who at that time that we're training them, they can learn about how we operate. And so it ended up being just kind of the perfect fit. What separated me from other candidates that also applied for that position? It's a great question. I don't know exactly. What I do know is that there was someone else that got hired for my position. And so they did a bunch of interviews, this, that, and the other thing. And that person ended up not working out. The company I work at, our profanity filter is not totally, not totally in. It's a little bit more ragtag in terms of what people are willing to experience. We all have thick skin. I remember at my first company meeting, the CEO said, I'm sorry if you guys don't like me swearing, but blank that. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I can fit in here, but not everyone could. And so this other person that got the job, they ended up not working. I don't know exactly why that was, but I sent my resume in right as they were sending theirs out. And so it just kind of happened to be a timing thing, I think, more than anything. But I believe on the job placement course, it talks a lot about, sending out high volume of applications. That I believe I got purely out of luck. Just happened to be the right timing. And the more resumes you send out, the more applications you send, the more likely you are to be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, Priyanka, it's a good point. She said one of her fears is being grouchy to the kids because you have a lot to do. I don't know how old your kids are. I would also sit down with them and I would say, hey, mom's going to be taking on this work set, and I'm doing that so that we can have we can have a better lifestyle. We can do all these things that we as a family are going to enjoy, and just make sure that they kind of understand. Which, if you do happen to have a situation where you get a little bit grouchy, they'll be a little bit more understanding if that happens. At the same time, I would never let myself get to the point where I'm grouchy at my family because of something at work. I always try to keep my work contained within work. And if something about one of the projects that I'm working on, something about my work is annoying, sometimes I'll tell my wife about, but I'm very specific to say, this is a work problem. I'm trying to solve it and I can't come up with a solution to it. And then, and sometimes we'll chat it over. But at the same time, I don't like to let my problems in my life go to work. So definitely having a separation of those two is pretty key. Christina asked, biggest fear on day one would be having too many questions about getting particular systems set up while trying to assert my value. Great question. That's not a question. The next question is needing help on day one bad or expected? I personally didn't have any of that. When I first started, there was a whole team of IT, and they came over to my computer. They got it set up with the correct systems, the correct versions, and all of that. That's kind of the nice thing about working in an office on a computer that belongs to your company. If you're working from home on your own laptop, you won't have someone come and set those things up for you. So you'll have to set it up yourself. I wouldn't be too worried about that, just because with the amount of tutorials that there are on YouTube, there's tons of solutions out there. And it's typically, people aren't expecting very much from you from day one. And chances are, you'll have like someone that's working with you kind of like as your buddy. But the CTO isn't going to say like, okay, well, did you install it yet? They're not going to be spending their time kind of babysitting your installation process. And then worst case, as you're going through, if you are running into difficulties, reach out to some of the other people that you've met while you've been a student here. Reach out to, some of the faculty and say, hey, I'm on the job, I have a quick question. Do you know the answer to this one thing? There was another person that I worked with at the Tech Academy, and I text him all the time, and I'm like, hey, working on this thing, do you have any experience with that? No? Okay, no worries. And he'll also, ask me questions as well. And so we kind of have a good back and forth. Do you intend to choose that industry? In terms of the energy industry, King, if you're still here, I wanted to clarify that a little bit. Working in the energy industry, I have no preference on that. There's, the company is a great company, and we're definitely one of the larger energy suppliers. And what we do is we basically connect up energy generation companies, so people who actually produce electricity, and then we connect that to a customer who needs to receive energy. And the people that are working on the generation, whether that's solar, wind, or fossil fuel, whatever it is, those guys aren't necessarily spending a lot of time trying to get people to receive that energy. They're just pumping it into the grid. And so what our company does is we connect generators to customers. And our company has done, we've done some really cool things to where, and this is not to be a big environmental, talk, but we have a lot of people who, we really push moving towards green energy. That's just something that we do because we think it's, it's obviously a smart thing, and I feel like we can all make it smarter. Now we give people the option. You can choose green energy. It is a little bit more expensive, or you can choose brown energy. And with the brown energy, we give those, I say green and brown. Green is renewable, brown is non-renewable sources. It's kind of the terminology we use. But for the people that don't opt to go for the green energy, we still provide 25% of their energy from renewable sources. And we can do that because we've grown to the point where we have, and we can essentially eat the cost of that, but it's something that we do to kind of give back. So is it something that I'm passionate about? Like, I mean, like, kind of, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that I'm stuck in the energy industry. I would say that I am pretty planted in the data side of things and seeing how companies work. Now, I also don't really have any intention of leaving the company because I've done really well with them. They're all great people. I really like my senior, all that type of stuff. But yeah, when I first started, someone said, hey, I remember another place that I was going to interview with was with Pods. And I was like, hey, are you passionate about helping people move across the country in a big box? It's like, no, but if it's going to pay me, then yeah, I love that. Okay, good. I want to make sure I don't skip over this question. What resources do you use to pick up those new skill sets? It's a great question. How do you find the things that you don't know? Because you don't know what you don't know. And honestly, I'm a pretty chatty person, so I like to talk to people. And I'm always trying to figure out, like, what are other people doing? What successful actions are other companies doing, or other database people doing, all that type of stuff. On top of that, there's just kind of the constant, I'm interested in technical things. So when I hear about new concepts, I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I start researching it. And then pretty soon I find out, like, oh, wow, you can actually, make these two things equal each other even though they're spelled totally differently. I remember my dad and I were talking, and he was, you know how in SQL, if you want the word cat to equal cat, that that returns as true. That's a good thing. My dad was talking to me about the way that something sounds, or the way that it's pronounced, so that cat, C-A-T, and K-A-T would actually sound equal. And so that returns as true, which is really useful when you start dealing with people's addresses, and other things like that, to where I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. Thomas Smith at 123 Main Street might actually be Tom Smith at 123 Main Street. And those things can sound similar enough. And that's a big portion of how do you make, when you're dealing with raw data, how do you make raw data useful? And so there's different tools that you can leverage for that. But yeah. Mistakes. Oh, sorry, Douglas, I will come back to that question. I just skipped one. I've always read and heard that interviews in the tech industry were intense whiteboarding, coding tests of your abilities, your experience. Your experience was different. Was the HR guy, Carl, the one that hired you, or did you have to go through more intensive interviews? So Carl was the first step, just to make sure that I was going to be a good fit. He kind of laid out some of the description. I then went back to the office where my senior worked, and he said, great, I want you to write a basic Slack statement. And I did that. He said, great, I want you to pull up the number of customers that we have in the state of New York. I want you to find out how many sales we failed to enroll, where we sold the person and then we weren't able to enroll them. So he ran me through a few of these things. In the last 3 weeks, I had spent, doing the Tech Academies program, getting through the database course, and doing as much as possible. So as I was going through, he then asked me one that stumped me, and I said, I forget exactly what it was, but he asked me to do a certain thing. And I started typing it out, and I told him, I said, so this part, this is how I would do this part. Now, this next part that you asked me for, honestly, if I were on the job, I would just go to Google, and I would figure out the syntax from there. And he was like, I Google things all day long. To where I was like, okay, great. So I'm going to go do that right now. So I went to Google, looked at the syntax, went back, and I wrote it, and it was correct. And he was like, I was upfront about, here's how I would solve that problem on the job. And he loved that. He thought that was great, because realistically, I Google things all the time to this day. and it's, you know, it's something that's, I don't want to say an industry standard. It's more of like, it's something that's normal. People go on Stack Overflow. That's where you learn things that you don't know. That's how you kind of grow as an individual. So it's not considered to be a bad thing. So yeah, that's kind of, that's how I did that. Douglas asks, can you share a few mistakes new hires tend to make during their provisional period? Yeah, so a few mistakes. Well, I'll tell you a few mistakes that I made, and then a few mistakes that I've seen others make. I was all chomping at the bit because I was excited. All right, I got the job. You know, I'm starting to get the hang of this. Now here's all the ways that I want to change everything that you're doing. And so I started pitching all these things. And when I think back to all the things that I was trying to recommend, I'm like, wow, I sounded like an idiot, you know, because I really didn't understand everything. But honestly, it was something where my senior liked that I was excited, but he didn't really intend to implement any of my suggestions. So I would suggest, don't go into it thinking, okay, great. On day 12, I'm going to try to rebuild everything. Your first step is really understand what they have and really understand where your company wants to go. And then once you understand those two things, now you can start making suggestions on solutions on how to get there. So that was one that I made. One that I think that I've seen other people make is, honestly, it's just an unwillingness to learn new things. I've had people that completely and utterly refused to do certain aspects of the job that I was like, why wouldn't you do that? You know, like there's one guy that he would build things, but he was unwilling to be in charge of all the testing of what he built. And this was someone who was like a professional and had, you know, far more experience than I did when starting out. He wanted other people to test the things that he builds, which, okay, got that. But he also wasn't very willing to go and look and see, once implemented, how does that change other things? You know, we've got all these spinning plates of different programs, different products and features. And you might implement something that changes something to spin out of control. You need to be willing to look at that and see, okay, we got to make sure everything continues to spin. And so he didn't like the more the data management side and look at the effects of the new things. He just wanted to be focused on building a thing. You tell me the logic, I'll put it into code. That's what I'm good at, and that's what I like. And so he ended up not doing. I think he made it past the provisional period, but it wasn't quite beyond that. Just because he had already predetermined that this was as far as he was going to go. And as soon as we needed more, it was kind of like, hey, we want you to do more. You're good at the one thing that you do. You were very good at that one thing. Can you do these other things? And he was just not interested in it.
Cool, Derek. It's a really good talk. I've got to jump off now for a student start. But I just want to say thanks for the talk. It was a great presentation. I think you're doing awesome, and I'm really happy for you. So, yeah.
And Rick, it is always good seeing you.
Yeah, and I definitely will see you again. And I do have questions, so I'll save it for the next talk.
Okay, sounds good, man.
All right, thanks, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. I can still stick around a little bit.
I'm still here. So I'm good till 3:30. So.
Oh, that's right. You guys are all on West Coast time. I'm over on East Coast time. It's 5:20, so it's technically after work for me. So this is great.
Well, feel free to, I want to be respectful of your time, and, whenever you need to log off. But I'm here as long as you're here and people are still asking questions.
Yeah,
I'll be here too.
Up front, and I'll say, hey, it's time where I need to go pick up my daughter or whatever. So don't worry about that. I see Danny's camera right now. Danny, do you have a microphone?
Yeah, I do.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay, good. So a couple other questions. where did you look for job opportunities primarily? Indeed, LinkedIn, others? Yeah, I mean, all pretty normal places. Glassdoor, Indeed. Those were the primary areas. There's a few places that I looked at. Gosh, I'm trying to remember the names of them. Dice as well. I mean, not anything above and beyond kind of the normal ones. I'm always a big fan too of going to local meetups, meeting other people, trying to build your connections that way. If I had to do it again, I would have gone full bore on that side. I just happened to get lucky in the one that I was on. Yeah. So I think that brings us down to the last of the questions. You are very welcome, Josh. I'm glad you guys all had the chance to attend, and I hope you guys crush it in your job search. That's one thing that I try to tell people, like, your confidence in it will make it go smooth. If you're worried, if you're nervous, if you're like, wanting to go a little bit slow just to kind of test the waters, I say just go for it. The worst case, like, I don't know that this is the worst case scenario, but let's say you get hired and you get fired. It's like, okay, you did. You now have more experience, and then the next one's going to be even easier. You also might just send out a bunch of resumes and not hear back. That's not that bad. You just worked really hard. You should be expecting to work hard. So yeah, I always stress to people, like, just give it your all and attack it, and use kind of that energy going into your interview, and that's been kind of the successful thing that I found. So if there's no more questions, then Mackenzie, I think I'm going to be signing off here.
Well, okay, so Ash did pop in and ask if your company was hiring for junior level software developers, but I think that's the last one.
It's a great question. I don't know the straight answer to that. I do know that we just hired someone that I'm working with in training, but I would say that it's very possible that we're looking for more. In fact, let me just do this. I have already made it very known that I would like more people to work underneath me, because I have a lot of need where I want people to delegate things out to. The reason why I'm pausing is because I'm actually going to our website to see if we've posted anything. It doesn't look like there's anything on our website yet. I think it's very, very realistic that we will start looking for more developers, because our company is growing at a lot faster than I was expecting, especially coming out of the whole pandemic area. I don't know what the company stance is on remote positions. I think largely we do like people that are in person. If someone's willing to relocate, all good with that. I mean, we are literally paying for someone in a hotel right now to potentially relocate. So can we add you on LinkedIn if you have an account? Absolutely, man. 100%. Go ahead and add me. Honestly, I'm really bad at social media. While I was going into my job search, I was really good with LinkedIn, but after a little bit, I'm just kind of like, I suck at social media. Like, I don't even have Facebook on my phone. But yeah, add me on LinkedIn. That way, we're a connection and all that stuff. And I'll log in a little bit later tonight. I'll make sure to accept all your requests. But yeah, that way we can definitely stay connected. And also feel free to reach out to me, on LinkedIn. I'll also put some of my contact information when I add you guys as well. And if you have questions, like if you are like, hey, I got a job doing database work, I'm working on this stored procedure and they're using this thing, what the heck is that? reach out to me. I'm super willing to help on those type of things, because I've been there and I've asked those questions. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, if there's no other questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. It's been fun chatting with you guys, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yes, Derek, thank you so much for joining us. I will totally reach out to you to book another talk in a couple of months or a few months. So
okay.
You're on my list now, and you can never get off of it. And thanks everyone that joined us. Thanks for staying late too, if you were able to. I do just want to point out that we're going to have Tech Academy graduate Scott Katzelnick on next week to discuss how to stand out and a guide on future success in the tech industry. So make sure to catch that one. And thank you so much, Derek. That was amazing.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Derek.
All right, guys. Yep. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining this week. Hopefully I'll see you next week. And have a good one. Have a great weekend.